Jesus. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Happy New Year. It's good to see everyone again. I call the Thursday, January 12th, 2023 Peninsula School District Board of Directors study session to order. Can we please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we are going to start with the approval of our agenda for this evening. Are there any changes to the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Lori.
Second.
Second by David. To approve the agenda, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried and the agenda is approved. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Is there any discussion to the consent agenda prior to the vote? No. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Second. It's been moved by Chuck and seconded by Jennifer to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried and consent agenda has been approved. Right. Comments from the community. Speakers will be given up to 3 minutes or less, depending on the number of registered speakers. We'll be displaying a countdown timer so that the speakers will be aware of their time. I will call the first speaker's name and the next step speaker. So speakers, when you get to the microphone, please state your first and last name for the record. So we have 2 speakers tonight. The first is Carrie Trevette and the second is Ryan Anderson.
Thank you. 10 years in the main office at Goodman and the last 5 years at Key Peninsula Middle School. Today I'm here to advocate for KPMS. To give some background, my children attended preschool at Purdy and Vaughn Elementary, attended Minner Creek Elementary, Harbor Ridge Middle School, and graduated from Peninsula High School. Both had an exceptional educational experience in our district, and it set them up to be successful in college. At this time, I felt this was a reflection of our district and the support their schools received. Having that said, as a former Goodman staff member, Harbor Ridge parent, and current KPMS staff member, I now have to ask myself, do all students in our district have equal access to the same educational benefits? The answer is no. There is a stark difference in programs, courses, support, access, and equity compared to other middle schools. One of many examples would be field trips. Our students don't have the same access because of the distance of our school. We are put in a position where we have to charter buses, which cost our building more than other buildings. Can we have equity and consistency amongst our schools? Over the last 21 years, I have seen many unflattering articles about different situations at various schools in our district. Almost 100% of the time, district leadership came out with a counter-narrative or at the very least, a statement of support. After the article about KPMS came out in the paper, our staff spent the last week upset, frustrated, embarrassed, and mortified. We waited for someone, anyone from the district, from our school board to say something, to offer support, and to tell our staff that they are valued and respected. Instead, last Friday, our school board showed up for a photo opportunity related to our construction to promote the levy. After the week we had, I have to share, it was extremely insulting. We are worth more than a photo op, and we deserve your support. Jerry Gable has been our principal for 15 years and has done hundreds, if not thousands of things, both big and small, to make life better for our students and staff during her tenure. If other schools in our district receive published public support when unflattering articles come out, why not Key Peninsula Middle School? Can district leadership make a statement on our behalf supporting our administrators and our incredible staff? School demographics on the Key Peninsula are dramatically different from other schools in Gig Harbor. KPMS is considered a high-need school with more than 70% of students on free and reduced lunch. Our teachers, counselors, and classified staff are on the front lines every day, selflessly giving, supporting, and wrapping around our students while always supporting each other. An example of their support, we have not had a building sub since November. Our teachers give up their planning period every single day to cover for absences because subs rarely come out to KPMS. If we have one teacher out, it is actually 7 teachers who give up their plan to cover. If we have 2 teachers out, it is 14. For a school with 26 teachers and daily absences, they are exhausted, yet they are also my heroes. Can we have access to a temporary building sub while we wait for our vacant certificated position to be filled? Lastly, the Key Peninsula is not considered part of Gig Harbor proper. Many of our students have never been to Uptown or crossed the Narrows Bridge. Our families do not have a zip code which identifies their address as part of Gig Harbor. When we receive communications from our district related to community events to push out on Parent Square, the title almost always starts with Gig Harbor ... Our families frequently comment on this distinction and state that it's divisive. Our district talking points include being equitable and inclusive, and as a district, we have to be mindful of our entire population. We are Vaughan, we are Lake Bay, we are Long Branch, we are the Key Peninsula. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Ryan Anderson. Good evening, board members and staff. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you all tonight. I apologize for not dressing up, but I am coming straight from swim practice. Peninsula is 5-0. My name is Ryan Anderson. I am a freshman at Peninsula High School and a former student of Key Peninsula Middle School and Minter Creek Elementary School. I am here tonight to try and bring to light an equity issue at KPMS that urgently needs addressed. KPMS students are not being given the same opportunities as students of other district middle schools. This is a small chunk of a big issue, so I will only hit the high points tonight in my 3 minutes. Don't get me wrong, the staff at KPMS are amazing and do the best with what they have, but they can only work within the confines of the policies of PSD and state laws. It happened to me, personally, last year, when I was not afforded the opportunity of the advanced math classes that were offered at Goodman, Copachuck, and Harbor Ridge. I was told there were not enough students to form a class for algebra or geometry, and I was placed in an advanced 8th grade math class, despite my coming from the district highly capable program and my high state standardized test scores. This has slowed my path in high school, as I now have to take additional classes to get my high school credits, instead of getting them in advance, like some of my peers from the other middle schools have done. While filling out an application to a Naval Academy STEM program, I have found out that I'm even further behind some of my peers, now in the area of foreign language credits. Again, I am told KPMS did not offer foreign language classes because of a lack of interest. Had it been described to me as a possible high school credit opportunity, I would have taken the class. Now, I must navigate a finite time schedule to try and acquire all of the credits I would like, which is going to involve missing some great high school class experiences that otherwise could have enriched my learning and high school experience. I ask you tonight to find a solution to this problem. Perhaps a para-educator to supervise a class of students that are zooming into classes that are not offered at their school. Maybe a roving teacher who moves from school to school throughout the day, teaching Spanish at Harbor Ridge in the morning and KPMS in the afternoon. But please, make the student experience of those behind me better than mine, and make sure that opportunities for PSD students abound at each and every school. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 6 on the agenda. That's our study session. So I believe, is that Dan, Chris, James, who's going to kick that off? Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening, School Board Superintendent Barr. Thank you for having us again. And James and Chris can start walking up here because I'm not going to take very long. I would just like to very briefly thank you for all of your work again. As we've done some presentations on the levy, we've gone back to the strategic plan and the mission and the vision. And that skeleton and that bones and the structure that you gave us around the strategic plan, we spent last spring as a learning support team of building administrators, district administrators, and others, putting the meat on those bones. And then this fall, you had asked for, and we have been working on putting the metrics together to align with that strategic plan. We had some SIP presentations planned for this evening, and we appreciate your grace in pushing those back, because for our SIP plans and presentations to align with that work, it's imperative that we put the metrics in front of our principals and really decide on those. And so that's what we plan for you this evening. It's kind of an extension of the fall metrics that we were going to do back in November. James will circle around to some of that, but I am going to, again, thank you for your grace and thank you for the direction around the metrics. And I'm going to turn it over to James and Chris, because they have done the majority of the work on this and really appreciate their work. James?
All right, thank you. You know how much I love talking about data?
Almost as much as we like hearing.
So I want to start by not talking about district data and talking about what the state does and how we're going to do better than that. So the state has the Washington School Improvement Framework, the WSIF, as they like to call it. This is part of a federal requirement as part of the Every Student Succeeds Act, that every state grades and ranks schools for support and then publishes that to the public. My interpretation is that OSPI doesn't love that requirement, because what they've done is create a system that's really opaque and people don't know is there. So what they use is a pretty clever set of calculations. They look at a rolling 3-year average of a number of different factors. So proficiency rates on ELA and math tests, the student growth percentile, so how much students are growing relative to students who scored similarly the year before, or at high school, they're looking at graduation rate. They're also looking at the EL progress rate. That's the rate at which the school is able to exit students from receiving EL services. And so that they're fully mainstreamed at that point. They also look at regular attendance rate. This is the percentage of students who attend 90% or more of the school year. And that's adjusted relative to if a student comes to us late in the year, it's 90% starting from when they enrolled with us. At high school only, they also roll in the 9th grade on-track rate, so the number of students who earned all of the credits that they were enrolled in, and then dual credit completion rate. This is a really great metric. It's looking at the percentage of students at the high school who completed a dual credit course, either in CTE, an AP course, a college in the high school course. So any course that could have earned them college credit, what percentage of students who were enrolled in the school earned or completed one of those classes successfully. Whether the student actually took an AP test or paid the college and the high school fee, that's not factored in. It's that they completed the course. So they had done some really great work on those. There's some notes in what you have there. Each of those is kind of weighted into the larger calculations. So 40% of the score is for proficiency rates. 50% is that student growth or graduation rate. 5% is EL progress, and then all of the others are rolled together to be the final 5%. Overall, the scores that come out from that system almost perfectly track poverty rates. So while demographics have nothing to do with the actual calculations they're doing, we do find that the highest achieving schools all have the lowest poverty rates, and the lowest scores all have the highest poverty rates. It tracks it even more closely than what the state used to do for that. Yeah.
About special ed, I know when I go to the OSPI website and it shows our school district,
Mhm.
that the student groups that are most at risk in our school district are special needs, special ed and low income.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason that it doesn't correlate as closely with special education is because the special education rate doesn't vary as much from school to school as poverty rates do. And so we'll see as we look at the data that you're absolutely right. Students with disabilities are a leading group in terms of equity concerns, but because so many schools have special education populations right in the 11 to 17% range, things don't correlate as well with that because everybody's got about the same number. So for no particular reason, I'm going to use Gig Harbor High School as an example. Right, I spent most of my time there this week. So you can see a few things here on this graph. An overall score for Gig Harbor in that 2017 to 2019 timeframe. So because the pandemic suspended testing, it also suspended regular attendance measures. Our attendance measures were a bit different during that time. The state hadn't recalculated any of this in that time frame. But in that time frame, Gig Harbor was rated a 7.7. The lowest possible score is a 1.0. The highest possible score is a 10.0. This is set up, it is set up in a way that's competitive, it's relative. You can think about it as a zero-sum game. For one school to go up in rating, somebody else somewhere had to go down in rating. Okay? That line that runs across the chart there that says ID threshold, I'm not really sure why they chose that particular phrase. Below that line, which is a 2.3, that shows where the bottom 5% of schools scored across the state. And that's an important line. That's a federally required piece to designate, is that they somehow communicate where's the lowest 5%. Then from there, you can see the different equity groups that the state's focused on. So the core federally identified race ethnicity groups, along with English language learners, low-income students, and students with disabilities. You'll notice that there are some gaps there. There's a few reasons why those gaps will show up, and they'll show up in virtually every school across the state. The main reason is that there just weren't enough students in that group to share data publicly without revealing personal information from those students. The threshold for that varies a little bit, but it's typically around 7 students that need to be in that group. 7, yeah. In some cases, it's a little more, in some cases, a little less, but it's usually right about 7. The other reason that sometimes a group will get cut out is if their proficiency rate is higher than 95%, but not 100%. Because then we're isolating who is that maybe one student who didn't do well. Alternately, if the proficiency rate is less than 10%, they'll tend to mask that.
What do you mean mask it, not report it?
Not report it publicly. We can still see that on our internal metrics, on some tools that we get from the state, but it's not reported publicly. So let me show you a little bit more about how the state kind of obscures this. So if we're looking at the state report card site for Gig Harbor High School, we have to scroll down quite a ways. And we keep going. And then we see the Washington School Improvement Framework down towards the bottom. And this is true for every school. I'm just using Gig Harbor as an example. If we were to look at, say, one of our elementaries, we'd see even less racial diversity because the students are not necessarily in tested grades. All of our K-2 enrollment wouldn't include students who are tested. And the state, if we hover over any of those, the state identifies then sort of where that school fell. So we can see that decile scores, so what 10th of the state did they fall into? So Gig Harbor was in that top 10% of all schools for ELA proficiency rate, and then in the 70 to 80th percentile range for math. Yeah, So these color-coded pieces here are showing you something about the decile that that student group's performance was in relative to all students across the state. you'll notice on virtually every school in the state, the students with disabilities piece is going to have a lot of orange. In part because one of the main reasons that students get identified for special education is because of their performance on standardized tests, whether those were state tests or assessments administered by a school psychologist or another group. So we'll tend to see a lot of orange there. One thing that's interesting, and as a data guy before I came to Peninsula, this was something I was looking at for schools here. The regular attendance rate for many schools in the Peninsula School District was lower than was typical across the state. Yeah. This is not entirely uncommon in high-income areas. Lots of vacations.
James, I have a question I just would like for you to address.
Yeah.
So the date is 2017 through 2019?
Right.
Are you going to address that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So all of this data, as you can see, it's all old. The state was scheduled to release new data based on the 2020 state tests. That didn't happen. Part of the reason I'm showing you this right now is, again, like I said before, we're going to do this but better. The other part is that the state's going to release new rankings this spring. They'll include some pre-pandemic data and some post-pandemic data because they want to continue with showing that 3-year rolling average. As we show data, we're less interested in the rolling average and more interested in what's going on right now. Again, so those proficiency rates that you'll see there, they don't match what you'd see on the state report card site about assessments because that's looking at the 3-year average of 2017, 2018, and 2019 tests. And that's how they're going to determine which schools are going to receive additional support and additional scrutiny from the state. So a logical question you might have thinking about, are we going to have any schools that are going to be targeted by OSPI for additional support? There are two main support categories that we need to be thinking about. One of them is, the state calls it Tier 3 schools. That's the lowest 5% of schools. Or any high school that has a graduation rate below 67%. This is virtually every alternative school in the state. If we think about concentrating our highest need students into single schools, we would expect that school to need additional support. And so OSPI has some specific coaches, some specific supports available to alternative schools and what works in those, for example, in those alternative schools that aren't identified here that have graduation rates higher than 67%. The other support category that is going to be most relevant is Tier 2. Schools are going to end up in Tier 2 either because they have 3 or more groups of students that are below that identification threshold that are struggling. Statewide, that tends to be students with disabilities and then perhaps 2 more. We don't have any schools in that category right now. But the other one is if they're not exiting EL students at a rate sort of equivalent to other schools in the state. The state just changed the EL assessment this last winter. So at this time, we have no idea how we rank compared to other schools as far as exiting EL students in this most recent calculation. We're going to learn that when that's communicated to us in March. We know how well our students did, but not how well other students across the state did.
Is it fair to say that, in a way that it incentivizes not keeping students in comprehensive high schools?
That is a concern that people have, yes, is that you could inflate high school's performance on the school improvement framework by sending more students to an alternative school. So now for the part that we're going to do better. So our strategic plan dashboard, and I'm going to let Chris take over for this part.
You're going to be here to answer the questions on the
Yes.
civic data.
Yes.
I will talk you through it. Okay, so we have started work on publishing the strategic plan dashboard on our website. So this afternoon, this went live. If you go to the strategic plan, and I'm going to walk you through this, I'm going to do it live here in just a second. You can go to the strategic plan portion of the district website. You'll be able to click on this link. We're separating out our data dashboards based off of the goals in the strategic plan. We're focusing today on goal 1 and goal 4, learning environment and academic excellence. So I'm going to walk you through this now and kind of show you what we have so far, so you can get a feel for some of the data that's actually live as of right now. Like as we said before, that was the 2017, 2019 data. We're going to show you the 21, 22 data in our live dashboards. So, so you'll know what to expect when OSPI transfers over to that later this year. So on the district website, I'll just start at the beginning here. So you can find the strategic plan right here in the center area of the district website. From there, we've just added a button this afternoon for launch the strategic plan dashboard.
When I click that, it asks me for an email.
Does it? Okay, I will fix that. I will fix it right here. It's okay. I'm going to do it right now since we're all here. Public. There you go. Done. Okay, you should be able to go back now and take a look at that. So you have the ability to click on just the pictures here to go into the different goal areas. And so you can click on academic excellence. That takes you in. And then under academic excellence, we have 4 separate dashboards as of today. We will add more as we look at more metrics on that goal. So you're able to click on any of those links. And so I'll just go with the first one. Smarter balanced assessments based off of demographic groups. So some of the things that James was showing earlier. This is our live data by school, by grade level, as well as all of our overall proficiency rates. And so you can scroll through all of those. You can also look at the different demographic breakouts. So you could even, you can get down to the grade level at a school by demographic breakout and see what their proficiency rates are in both ELA, math, and science. And so, as James talked about earlier, the areas with blanks are the students with, or the demographic groups with an N of like less than 7. So the state doesn't report those to show those out. And so we have this dashboard on Smarter Balance by demographic group. We also, if you go back to the kind of page here, you can see this by racial and ethnic groups. In this district, our racial and ethnic group breakdown is really, we have a very small number in a lot of racial groups, and so they're not even, we didn't even show them on the dashboard. We did keep a couple of these because in some schools there are numbers that are viable. So you can scroll down and see those by school. And then we also have built just a general display dashboard on graduation rates, 9th grade on track, and dual credit completion. So you can see in the bar charts at the bottom the district total, as well as all 4 of our registered high schools. Our Peninsula alternative programs is like our GVA and some of the other programs that are all categorized into that group. And so you can see all of those numbers. Those are current numbers right now. And then we've also added in DIBELS, which is our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade reading screener. And so this is proficiency on DIBELS oral reading fluency, which is what's telling us whether kids can read in 3rd grade or not. And so we've added that to the dashboard because that is one of the metrics we wanted to track in the strategic plan. So under academic excellence, those are the dashboards we have. Back on the beginning here, you can also go to learning environment, where we have built 5 different dashboards. So we have the panorama sense of belonging data, which you can see how students feeling in a sense of belonging in their building by levels and by schools. So we built that out. You also can see panorama sense of belonging by demographic groups. And so like we did in the other data, that is also there for you. So you can look at that data that way. We also have the ability to look at, we've added attendance rates today. So attendance rates by grade level, since that is one of the Washington School Improvement Framework metrics. So you can look at by grade level, You can look at attendance data by demographic groups, and we also have added, because of the way that the attendance data is disaggregated, we can actually do a better job of disaggregating attendance data by race. And so that's here as well for you. So, yeah.
Your high school attendance rate, obviously, it's 63%. Last year do the students going running start, do they count towards the attendance rate? And so how do we track that there should be class of wherever they're going to running start?
Yeah, the short answer is that no, they don't count as part of our attendance rate because they weren't scheduled to attend a class with us. And TCC doesn't track attendance in the same way, nor are they required to report it. A key piece too on those attendance rates, that's not to say that elementary had an average attendance rate of 71.44%. That's saying that 71.44% were attending regularly. That's kind of an important distinction. We'll see some students, an increase in those students over the last couple of years who are attending very, very minimal amounts, where we're seeing attendance rates from that student of, say, like 20%. If we included them in sort of the average, then that would start skewing our number down quite a bit, which is why the state really focuses on how many students were attending regularly. There's a great body of research out there showing that 90% is about that inflection point. And it doesn't matter if it's excused or unexcused absences. If you're gone, you're missing the learning that happened in class at that day.
Do you think, would that be, and that is a really, I'm glad you said that because that's an important understanding. Is there a way to put that on the dashboard so when people look at it, they
Yeah.
understand what they're looking at? Things like,
Yeah, I think we need to do a couple of those distinctions. I think we need to do some of those distinctions around race as well, because we've not displayed some of those things because we don't display them publicly. It might be confusing for some people, and we just haven't described that yet in a clear manner.
Federally mandated categories.
Right.
It's not
Yep.
just us making stuff up.
It's not us making stuff up. That's when families register, they have to pick one of those categories. We don't pick the categories. That's those are federal requirements, like you said.
So, if we're gonna probably go into, once you get through this, we're gonna go into SIP planning for edits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
hold my question.
Do you have any other questions on the dashboard, or I'll let James go back? Okay.
I do have a comment, though. This is an incredible amount of work that you have taken the data and created something specifically for us outside of the state, what the state provides, and real-time data. So I just want to thank James and Chris publicly, because this is exactly what school districts need. This is exactly what boards need, but more importantly, this is exactly what our staff need to be able to look at trends over time. And if this is a benchmark, and this is our very first year, I can only imagine how much data we will have and how we will be able to see growth over time. So thank you for that.
And
Yeah.
I would just say thank you, Dan, because I know this is exactly what we wanted to see, so thank you.
Oh, and Dan, yes.
Dan as well.
They don't.
I mean, I was talking to all of you, but I was saying thank you for, as we said, we click on goal one, what's behind it? Now there's something behind it. And what are we gonna do for the other goals that may not be so much data driven, as put, learning environment, community engagement? What's the plan for, if someone clicks on one of those, what are we gonna put behind it?
We'll certainly have some additional qualitative data that goes in there. Whether that's community perception or descriptions of, community outreach projects, things like that. We're also at a point right now where we're in the middle of collecting most of our winter screening data. And so we're going to be busy on academic excellence for another week or two, just trying to make sure that we're providing as much as we can here. And then, yeah, absolutely, there will be additional content in each of those other three areas.
I'd just be curious.
Yeah.
How we are gonna come by that. Is that gonna be, like, suggestions from the board, staff, the community? I know we have Rotary partners and we have other kind of community partners. They just, like all of us and things like that. Just curious how we'll determine what goes fine to those.
James, could I have you speak to when we actually took out everything out of the strategic plan? Can you talk to how many metric points there were?
Yes, there were 117, some of which would be data tables themselves, not individual metrics. It's a lot. So we're in the process of identifying what is it that we can kind of distill and make most digestible to the public in each of those areas. I've shared my thoughts with everybody, and I don't want to be the only one who who puts things on that list. But how do we get that down to a number more like 10 or 20, not 117? Because there's a lot. And it's not that all of those things aren't important, but how do we really focus on what's most important and most of most importance to the community outside? So as we're talking about what's really important, I want to talk briefly about assessments and types of assessments. I'm going to try to make a sports analogy here. If we're trying to wonder about how to help our team do better, we don't just look at whether they made it to the Super Bowl. If we're trying to help a student, we don't look at just whether they graduated. If we're trying to help our team, we don't look at just the score at the end of the game. We don't look at just the state test score at the end of the year. We might look at what's the score at the end of each quarter. That gives us quite a bit more information about progress. That kind of correlates with, but it's not the same thing as the score at the end of the game. And at some point, someone, the coaching staff, they need to be paying attention to what's going on at each play. Maybe not every person in the back office is aware of what each player was doing on every single snap of the ball. But we're all part of that, looking at sort of what's our time frame. Are we looking at the score at the end of the quarter? Are we looking at the highlight reel? Are we looking at the action in each play? So our summative assessments, these are like the big score at the end. These are assessments that are intended to certify that learning took place or to evaluate that a program is working. So these happen all the time for students. These are state tests. They're final exams, whether that's for a unit or for the whole course. They're concerts. They're art displays that are up in the hallways. Any kind of unit project that students are doing. These are all summative projects that kind of represent the end and the stamp that goes on that says, yes, you learned this. Formative assessments are those ones that are intended to change instruction or figure out which students need supports, which students need something extra, and then what students just need a little bit of feedback so that next time they do even better. These are screening assessments like DIBELS. They're interim assessments like that Smarter Balanced has interims or iReady. These could be low stakes quizzes, mini whiteboards that students are holding up their answers on, or peer feedback. At the end of the day, the type of assessment that makes the most impact on student learning is formative. It's the hardest one for us to capture at scale because it happens moment to moment. It's something that we can't necessarily sort of capture and give you in a digestible way. We can grab those screening results. We can grab those interim results. And in some cases, we need to start doing that. So the reasons that we want to report some of those other assessments, like DIBELS, like Chris was showing, we have DIBELS data from the fall, and then the DIBELS window is happening right now for the winter. It's for the 3 T's. Timing, we want to make sure that we're providing people with sort of fresh, relevant data, not just what happened in September, but what's going on in January. We want to make sure that we're transparent to the community. We shouldn't need to be waiting a year to find out if schools got better, waiting a year to find out if that grade level has learned more. And then the last one is transformation, which is just because I only saw that there was a T at the end of improvement, and I was trying to figure out something that would work there. T, T, and I didn't sound as good as the 3 T's. So when principals and their building leadership teams are working on school improvement plans, they need to have some measures along the way before they get to the state test to know if what they're doing is working or if they need to pivot and make a shift or devote additional resources or if mission accomplished and they can move on to the next goal. So to that end, where we're going with school improvement plans is going to be a shift in format. This is a screenshot from the Office of System and School Improvement. OSPI thought they needed another division that would have a similar name, so it's OSSI. Why the state chooses these things, I don't know. I like to think it's just a sense of humor that someone has. They've worked on a school improvement template that's really great. It's very powerful. Schools that are targeted by the state need to use this plan. It's a great template anyway, and we're going to move towards using this plan for all schools. They talk a lot about SMARTY goals on there when you're evolving past the SMART goal. So they break that out into specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, and then that it's inclusive and equitable. Can all of your students access the improvement that you're trying to offer? And are you offering improvement to the students that need it most? If we're only focused on one group of students that maybe don't need the improvement opportunities as much, then do we need to maybe rethink how that goal is working? So we're really making sure that it's inclusive to all students and serving those students that need the new opportunities or the improved opportunities most. So as we move forward, you'll see school improvement plans kind of in this form, along with some of that data that we just looked at on the data dashboard.
So my immediate, since I've been on the board a while, is I'm gonna have to see how this looks, because I appreciate SIP plans, that the way we used to do it back in 2015, 16. Everything you've done is great. I'm just saying, I'm gonna have to see how this looks. Because
Sure.
if an elementary or middle school or high school came previously, there were bar charts, and you could easily follow a cohort from the past, like, where did that second grade, third grade, fourth grade? It was very easy for me as a board member to look at that data in front of me and be able to track it and be able to ask a question, what happened to this cohort? Why did they fall off in math? Or why? So how, for me, how is this gonna look populated? How easy will it be for a board member to quickly on a board meeting during a SIP plan be able to identify, are we on track at that school to hit third grade reading efforts? Are we on track to hit graduation or are we ready to graduate? So I guess for me, I'm gonna reserve how this looks, but this doesn't really tell me currently, because one, I can barely read it, but what's it gonna look like once you populated the data
Sure.
behind it? Are there gonna be bar charts, or what's it gonna look like when it's finished?
Yeah, and this portion of the SIP goal template is really a way for the school to capture what they're going to do, who's going to do it, how they're going to know that it's working. Chris has some very clever ideas for how we're going to pre-populate some of the data that you just looked at for the schools, so that they don't need to spend the time gathering that can be there right for them as they get started on the template.
One of the things, that I was chatting with Chris and Dan a couple days ago, was that we know we're coming out of a pandemic, so we know that our initial data is not gonna be great, but that we can use current data as a benchmark, meaning today, I'm gonna just make this up, we make today the benchmark day 63% attendance rate. May not be great, but we wanna be higher than that, and that our data for year-over-year growth, as a board member, I wanna know what that school principal is doing to get that year-over-year growth to, for instance, 100% third grade reading. So they're at 50% today. What's their goal to get to 100%? And like we were talking about the other day, our goal is to be smart. I wouldn't use it smart, but to be that goal, to be realistic. We don't want to go from 50% to 100 overnight. We know that's not realistic.
Right.
But so for me, I want to know if we have a 5-year strategic plan, what's the goal of getting from where we are today in each of the OSPI metrics to where we want to be, and where we're going to set that bar. How we're going to set that bar. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we know we might have more current data within our school district than OSPI. It's easy to see. The other day I saw there, they were showing 19 data for science, and so we know we're gonna have more current data. But if someone's living in another state or another country like I was, and I go to the OSPA website, we're still gonna see what their most current, because they haven't picked up with our data.
Yeah. And there are places on OSPI that would direct them to district resources, but whether they'll sort of respond to that particular marketing from OSPI is hard to say. I think in addition to what you were saying about the accountability function of a school improvement plan, another big, maybe underappreciated part of a school improvement plan is your ability to, and all of our ability to say, wow, if there's this great success that's happening at Minter Creek, how do we recreate that at Discovery? How do we share successes that are happening around? And I think that school improvement plan process is something that really kind of surfaces that, what's working really well. Yeah.
We might hear a school principal saying what's worked great, and then a board member would say, are you sharing this information with your other schools? And if so, great, if not, why not? But for me, I mean, when a principal comes here to do their SIP, I know that we'll be able to access something like this, but for me, I wanted to keep it simple, stupid, and show us something that we can quickly identify. And that's sort of Jennifer's point. A member of the community logs into this. I don't want it to be too cumbersome for them to be able to see
Right.
what we're doing.
Can I jump in, James?
Yeah.
Yeah, David, thank you. We've had many conversations and talked about what we used to present. I'll just add to what James said. Our principals do a wonderful job in involving their teacher leaders in development of this. And when we look at a SIP plan, what we're really trying to do is allow them to build a roadmap as to how they're going to reach those goals. These will be very meaningful when they're done in this fashion and very intentional for them. I think when you refer to some of the other pieces on what was presented previously, that's for us to put together a template so that they can present to you. This is going to be a pretty involved form. And when they come to you to present in their 10 or 15 minutes, that's where we can really put together that presentation that is much that quick look that you talked about. Kind of that Reader's Digest version with the good data and charts and graphs, but really highlighting the activities that they have planned to move towards those goals.
I have a question, James. Would it be a benefit, in my past life, I was a school improvement director. So would it be a benefit for us to have AMOs, adequate measurable objectives over time, growth measures that we basically would, from our district level, we would really kind of give them so they wouldn't be making that up, that were statistically acceptable and aspirational but achievable?
Yeah, we can absolutely do that and set those goals, sort of looking at what's going to get you 20% of the way to that 100% goal. For some schools, that's going to be a lot. For other schools, that's going to be something that's a little bit more attainable. And so we can absolutely kind of set those suggested goals for the buildings.
That was going to be my question. So this is fantastic. I love being able to look at all this and I see where we are now. And my hope, my goal for all of this is 100%. And I know that's not always realistic, but what are those short-term, long-term goals and how do we get there? And will they be the same for each school, or does each principal get to pick an area that they want to focus on for academic excellence, or any of those areas? So is it consistent across all schools?
So currently our schools have a lot of leeway in terms of which of those 117 metrics they're going to focus on. Some of them are a little bit more obvious. So for example, you're going to hear a lot of elementaries talking about third grade reading. That's a high focus for everybody right now. You're going to hear our high schools really focus on graduation. That's the most important metric for them, for their students, and sort of what's going to lead to graduation. So some of those, although we say they've got some choice about where they're going to get started, in some cases the choice is pretty clear. Again, learning environment, if they're looking for a learning environment goal, they're going to focus on that belonging data, particularly at secondary, that just isn't what we'd want it to be right now. So even though we say that they've got choice, they're going to be awfully similar in that way.
What are we going to do as far as tracking? There's OSPI has 3 requirements for graduation.
Mm-hmm.
One is test scores, academic achievement. One is the preparing your high school
High School and Beyond plan?
and the other one is
Credits.
I thought that was the first thing I said, credit.
So,
Academics or high school and beyond planning, the third is also.
so the pathways.
So what are we doing to, sorry, I was trying to do this yesterday. So what are we gonna do to make sure that our middle schoolers complete your high school and beyond plan? Sure you have to do one of those, right? Looking at you, when you were.
I never actually had to complete high school and beyond. I don't know if that would keep
Okay, okay. Is that because of COVID?
No, with our middle, so the high school and beyond plan has a lot of components to it. With our middle school students, we don't tend to call it the high school and beyond plan yet, to not necessarily over intimidate them. But there's some planning activities that really registering for 9th grade is a key part of that. It's an initial step in that process. So our high school and beyond plans, as we are moving forward, we have a new tool that we're pretty excited about called Naviance. That I think you've maybe heard Aaron O'Neill talk about a little bit. That's really a tool that's going to help students do some improved career and college research. And I say career and college, right? Not one or the other, but accessing both of those things to kind of come up with what is it that they want to do after high school? What is it that they're going to do during high school to prepare them for that plan? That also helps track their credits. Making sure that they're on track to graduate in that way. That third requirement of the pathways is the piece that's a mess from a tracking standpoint. So students can meet the graduation pathway in the state would count 8 different ways. Some of them are tests, so whether that's Smarter Balanced, the SAT or ACT. Also, if a student is intending to enter the military and they meet the enlistment standard for that branch on the ASVAB, that counts as well. They could complete dual credit coursework in English and math. They could do a combination of all of those things, or they could complete a CTE pathway that sets them up for success in a career. Throughout the state, we've also never had a year where we didn't have a waiver from that requirement. So students in Washington State have never been required to pass a test or meet a pathway formally in order to graduate. Officially, that waiver will expire for students in the class of 2024. They'll no longer have access to that. To date, that hasn't been the reason a student didn't graduate. But we're coming up on that becoming an increasingly important feature.
The high school and beyond, on the OSPI website, when you click on that,
Mm-hmm.
it says they have to complete that plan while they're either in 7th or 8th grade.
They have to start it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we, I mean, is there gonna be anything in any of this data for the district to track that those 7th and 8th graders have started completing the high school and beyond plan?
Yeah, right now, the way that that's been done historically has varied a little bit middle school to middle school, although, let me rephrase that. It's varied high school to high school. As the high school counselors come and work with middle school students towards the spring of each year. So not middle school by middle school, high school by high school. So there's been some variance, and that's part of the reason we brought on Naviance, is to be able to better track, did we really get every 7th or 8th grader is involved in that system, and we'll have much better visibility into if a student missed it, why did they miss it? How do we get back to them and support them? And so, yeah, if that's something that we want to put on the dashboard, that's something we'll certainly be able to do. Yeah. That was a new requirement that started, again, just shortly before the pandemic, was that high school and beyond plans start in 7th or 8th grade. And it starts with a career interest or aptitude survey, which can take a lot of different forms, and takes 2 different forms in the past between Gig Harbor feeders and Peninsula feeders.
Do you know any other schools that have done what you did? Done this now, or we click on it, all this and find it?
Not as well.
I will make a comment. In a large urban district that I used to work for, we spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars bringing in a company that developed something very similar and was not static. So that's why I had to do a shout out, because you did it in a short amount of time, and it's something that I think Chris can also talk about, that it will be changing as your needs and as the public kind of has an opportunity to see it and give feedback. So Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was just the very first version of this. It's going to change constantly. I already have ideas, just ran out of time to get them done. But also you're going to see, starting to see trend data, as James mentioned, as soon as the windows close on like Dibbles and Panorama, which close very soon. And so we'll be able to actually show how kids are starting to trend even this school year. And that'll be in the next few weeks. So the dashboard will continue to evolve as we move forward. So, yeah.
Ryan said we want to be the best sports in the state, so
That's why we picked the Washington School Improvement Framework, because that's how the state ranks. So,
Will it have color?
absolutely.
what is when the high schools come, or when the next schools, when we do our actual SIP plans, and they come to the board, what are they gonna hand us? Is it gonna be something like this, or something that's more easy to understand? So just curious, what's your next step?
So James and Chris have done a wonderful job preparing this. You're seeing it before principals are. Actually, I think John Helwick and I sent out this presentation to them just before we both left to go to our different meetings, mine here. So they're just seeing this, and that will allow us, and this extra time allows us to put it in front of them and really align their presentations to the dashboard that they just presented. So, yeah, and we talk about growing pains with the strategic plan and whatnot, and I just have to compliment James because, you know, he's been an assistant principal all year and a data and research director. We did steal him the last several days so that we could get this work done, so that's been a challenge, but it'll be really beneficial for them, for us to put the dashboard in front of them. I've already spoken to 2 or 3 of the principals about shifting the school improvement plan template to this, and they're ready to go. They're ready to go. They just want some clarity, and we took the opportunity to put together the dashboard that'll provide clarity, and will help them tie their measures and their data in their SIP plan presentations to the dashboard so that we have that alignment.
I had just a couple of questions. How difficult is it to maintain and update the data? That was one. And then will there still be this historical, so if what I see today, will I be able to see it when you update it?
Setting it up the first time is a lot harder than maintaining it.
Okay.
So thankfully, Chris and Mason. Okay, Mason. I've been at the other building too long. Chris and Mason have really set this up with the idea of making updates easy to do in the future. So it'll be a lot simpler now that the structure is built on the back end for both the data and the dashboard displays. So it won't take nearly as much time to add in, say, the winter Dibbles data as it did to get the fall data ready, now that we've got the process to do that.
Okay. And is there a schedule of updates that we can keep regularly? And the only reason I ask is because oftentimes when we put something, I don't mean us, but people who have websites, you put something on there and then it kind of gets lost, and, you know, someone coming in looking for data can find information about a 2018 football roster, but not 2022 football. And
Right.
I made that up. Clearly, I am not talking about our football, but just for example, I want to make sure that this information is relevant and timely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we get to the point where we have 2 points in time for some of these measures, we can also describe when is the third point in time coming. Because we do have a calendar set out so that we know that. In general, we could know sort of every year, we're going to have new data by the end of September. We're going to have more data by the end of January. And then spring windows come in a variety of types of spring. Some are spring in the sense of March, and some are closer to June. Just depending on that metric. But as we get to a point where we have trends, we'll be able to kind of communicate more clearly to the public, this is when the next point in this trend is coming.
Okay. And last question, do we have a way to track what people are searching for on our website? So can we track if people are looking for certain data?
Yeah, and we can provide reports too. So
Okay.
we have that ability. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? No.
I said what we used to do, and that what I like to see when I'm looking at it, but, you know, that's just me, I'm just wondering what's the rest of the board want to see when they look at it? Is there any specific you want to see? Talk too much, but I'm excited to see this, you know, I've been waiting for this. me, I'm visual, but not everybody's the same. Just curious if the rest of the board has got any.
I'll speak to that. I don't know if this is exactly what you're asking, but a comment. But Chris already said that this is in the works, and so I'm kind of restating what, but I'm looking right now at the Smarter Balanced under academic excellence, just one of the pieces of information, and I would also just agree that what I like, regardless of what it is when the website is really easy for families to navigate, and particularly someone who's just looking for a piece of information or a group. And so I think to that end, anywhere we can add in more, like there is, I see now a little asterisk here that says confidential populations not displayed, but even if that could say groups with less than 7 students or whatever it was, because I think that is not intuitively obvious to just anyone. Because what if you're in one of these groups and it's blank, and you go to you go to that school and you're thinking, where am I? And so yeah. So anyway, like and because we all look at this stuff all the time, and but most people don't. So I think that's what I would love, is just anywhere that there's a way to just make it simple or add more information is always helpful. But it's so impressive. I mean, thank you so much for putting all the work into this.
Yeah, I think I don't think I'm able to answer your question, David, because I think this is all new. So I think we have to be open to it being a work in progress. We can iterate a little bit, and I think we have to just wait and see what works, right? And, off the top of my head, I'm thinking, there's so much information here, but I do think a lot of us do work well visually with graphs and charts and things put in relative terms, but then there are folks who do want to dig deeper. So if there's any way to sort of nest this information so that it's not all on one page at once, but really you can go as deep as you want, but you're not immediately hit with everything. Yeah. I think that degree of sort of hierarchy of simplest to more detailed would be helpful. But I think all of us just being open to iterating it a little bit, right? And just waiting to see what the experts bring forward as this is what really is the useful information. Do you understand it this way? There's some other ways we can look at it. This is incredible. Thank you so much. This is really amazing. My jaw kind of dropped looking at this. I was not, really well done. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, this is going to be a great tool for the district, but then also for each of the schools just to look at. And just the first blush on it is kind of eye-opening to look at KPMS, some of the data that's out there. It's eye-opening just to see it in this form. So, great work.
All right.
So again, for me, I agree. I mean, it's a work in progress. For me, this is what's worked well. Is that the board, the principal comes to us with a SIP plan to be able to quickly identify. Like right now, this is very busy, which it's a lot of data. And at a school board meeting, I want to be able. There's a chart that I can quickly see. That one of our cohorts is not on track. I want to be able to quickly see that, to be able to identify, say, what are we doing to help this cohort? If it's going to be easy to see, like if you bring all this data, in a board meeting for the SIP plan, integration, I'd be okay with that. We're responsible for elementary, middle school, high school, certain OPI data points, and I just want to be able to quickly see it. Are we on track?
Yeah.
What happened here? And that's all.
May I ask a question? OSPI has, and they use Tableau. I don't know if it's probably a proprietary name, but I'm wondering, hearing how to simplify. Many times if you click on the data, then a graph will come up. And then many times I'll take a picture of the graph and just use the graph. But it's in that format. Do we have the software to be able to do something in that manner as we start getting trend data
Yes.
of cohorts? Okay.
Yes.
I'll talk on that one real
Yeah.
quick. So, to be brutally honest, we ran out of time on graduation. We were going to do kind of that exact thing on graduation. Graduation, if you look at that dashboard right now, is just 3 simple graphs. We didn't have time to break it down into the bigger charts. So that's what we plan to do on all of them, is like an easy one-look screen, and then you can click on those and get to the kind of the ones that we showed you here, but we wanted to get all the data that we had in front of you, so that we could show that to you tonight. And then most of them will look a lot like you see on the graduation data right now, where we did the opposite and we did the high level overview on the graduation data, and then the breakdowns will come later. And so that's how they're gonna look.
And that makes perfect sense, and it's like, when I went into those various parts that
Mhm.
when I clicked into the strategic plan, and I clicked on, say, for instance, Martindale, it just showed me, again, this is a benchmark. I clicked on Martindale and it gave me their one line, there was no cohort track. And obviously, if we use this year's benchmark, there's not gonna be a cohort track, so it'll be hard for me as a board member to know if my second grade class is on track to be 100% reading next year until we build that data, I think, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can kind of think about what Chris and the team put together in terms of the dashboard views. That's really a sampling of what they'll be able to do for every metric, with the obvious gap that we have right now of trend data, that we're really excited to be able to have as soon as later this month, to be able to add and put that for you. In addition to kind of the detailed plans of what schools are doing to improve and with whom and with what resources, they'll also make a more digestible set of slides for you that kind of goes through what are some of the key metrics that they're looking at, what are their benchmarks, so that they're able to kind of focus the attention right on what are the things that are most meaningful right now in that school. And although that's going to be, say across elementaries, it's going to be reading, there might be a little bit of variance in terms of, is there a special population that they're really focused on right now, or is there a particular grade level? Maybe third grade's really under control and they're focusing extra on first or second. So that's where you'll be able to see some changes and us supporting them, and I think getting your feedback on what worked in terms of those presentations is going to be really valuable for us as we then look at how do we do this even better next year.
That was going to be one of the things I wanted to bring up, and thanks to James for doing that. This is really going to be a transition year on the SIP plans too, because they did a lot of this work already this fall, and so we're trying, now that the dashboard's here for them to use, we don't want them to have to redo all of it, and so trying to move it into a format and then be able to start even better next year, actually start better next year this spring, is one of our goals moving forward as well. So.
Well, clearly, we know you guys were planning on presenting something different, and this was a quick pivot with a lot of really good information. So it's very obvious to me that you took the feedback that we gave in October and put it into this plan. I'm frankly kind of blown away with the amount of information that you presented tonight. And I know that how it's presented and how it looks is a work in progress, and you need 2 points to make a line. We don't have that yet. So I just want to thank everyone for putting in the time and presenting something really valuable that aligns with what we've asked for, that aligns with our strategic plan, that allows us to kind of compare ourselves to other places in the state. David mentioned in our mission, it says we want to be the best in the state. So to be able to look at something objectively across all school districts is really helpful for us as we work to set goals with all of you. So I'm really pleased with what you brought here tonight. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't know, it's a little quiet. Okay. Well, that concludes the business part of the night. Our next meeting will be did you have something else, or you just kidding? Okay.
No, I'm just getting this out of the way.
The next will be a business meeting on January 26th. It will be here at Swiftwater at 6:00 p.m. And with that, we are adjourned at 7:09.
Thank you, people, for coming.
Last year. This one, the 13-minute.